Hey, welcome to my Warframes Where They Are Now series, a little series I've had brewing in the back of my mind since the early days of Warframe, quote unquote. I'm going to put this little intro at the beginning of every video in this series. If you've heard this once or more, feel free to skip it. This is just my opinion and is not guaranteed to be fact. Remember, with Warframe, everyone plays at least a little different from each other. That's why there's 52 frames as of making this intro, of course. That being said, I do plan on being as objective as I can with this series. But bias will always be a potential problem, and will definitely shine through in certain episodes, if not all. Now, that being said, I hope you enjoy the series.
July 28th, 2023. This week's subject is Zephyr, the bird frame. She could also be considered the wind frame, but let's be real, everybody considers her to be a bird frame. Without further ado, let's get into it, huh? Base stats on a level 30 Zephyr Prime are 125 armor, 225 energy, 450 health, 450 shields, and 1.2 sprint speed. She's surprisingly durable, although her armor stat is a little low. Zephyr's passive is her bones are made out of balsa wood, and she also gains 150% critical chance while she's airborne. In all seriousness, she's quite floaty and it's very fun, but it does feel kind of weird nowadays that she has that floaty mechanic because movement is fairly easy now. I'm pretty sure she came out before they added bullet jumping to the game. I am not 100% certain on that, and I even tried googling it to no avail, but yeah. Zephyr's one of the few that actually has a passive augment, and in this case it is disable Zephyr's reduced airborne gravity and increase her ability strength by 15%. I don't think I'll ever use that one because I like being floaty, but I will say if you really want to milk that little bit of extra strength out of her, I guess you can. Zephyr's first ability is Tailwind. Yeah, it does that. You can also hold it to kind of just float in the air to abuse the critical chance bonus, and you can also aim downward to do her dive bomb. I will say I hardly ever use the other two. Granted, I probably should use the hover a bit more often. The augment is target fixation. Casting Tailwind resets Zephyr's bullet jump. Each enemy hit increases Tailwind damage by 100%. Damage resets upon hitting the ground for 2 seconds. I mean, it would be an interesting build. Honestly, I may end up fucking around with that at some point in the future, so if nothing else, because I feel like that'd be a fun thing to do. Her second ability is Airburst. I feel like this ability is kind of slept on a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it's not as good as other abilities, but it does have its uses. If you hold it, it knocks enemies out of the way, which is But if you only tap it, it just kind of sucks all the enemies into it, which is kind of nice. It's like a miniature version of Pull. And Mag's first ability, of course. Comes in handy if you like to use melee, and hell, it could be kind of nice if you're using, particularly a wide burst shotguns, like similar to like the Arcoplasmor or the Cedo, if you really want to get your shit going. But it's definitely one of the abilities that surprised me how well it scaled up into Steel Path. I actually use it quite a lot when I'm using Zephyr because of that. And the augment is Airburst rounds. Each enemy hit by Airburst increases secondary damage by 40% for 14 seconds. Thanks to Kit Guns and now the Incarnons, I feel like this would actually be a pretty nasty thing to have for certain mission types. I will say, that being said, I can now kind of see Archon potential for Zephyr, provided they give us a secondary that can one-shot Archons. Assuming there isn't one already. There might already be one. But yeah, no, that actually has potential. I like that.
Her third ability is Turbulence. She's surrounded by air that protects her from bullets and redirects them. This ability is actually pretty crazy effective, and honestly is part of the reason why I say she's goddamn tanky. As long as this is active, enemies have to either get up close and personal or have some magical bullshit like the Xmas do. Comes in handy.
And the augment is Jetstream. Turbulence increases movement speed by 40% and projectile speed by 100% for Zephyr and her allies. I personally wouldn't use it just because it takes up a mod slot. However, if they were to ever give us an augment slot, I think that might be one that's worth using for the projectile speed if you like bows. I wouldn't use it otherwise, because as nice as the movement speed is, I don't really see it being a necessity for me. Especially, you know, in a game where Wisp is one of the most popular frames, and her first ability gives everybody a speed buff. So, granted, if you're playing by yourself, it might not be a bad thing to have. Her fourth ability is Tornado. She sends out 3 of them, and they just kind of go to town and sweep enemies into them. It's great if you're trying to just run through an area, because, you know, it just gets them out of the way and stops them from shooting at you. But they don't do a whole lot of damage, which is ultimately fine, because it's more of a CC ability anyway. You can change the damage type that the tornadoes do by shooting at them, but again, they don't do a whole lot of damage. Not a whole lot of reason to do that. Thanks to the Eximus rework, it doesn't pull on the Eximus anymore, which kinda sucks, but it still has its uses ultimately. And the augment is Funnel Clouds. Creates 8 additional tornadoes. All tornadoes are 50% their original size and won't pick up enemies. Why? I mean, whoa, They definitely need to go back and buff the damage of this if that's gonna be the case, because that ain't gonna do shit on anything beyond the regular star charts. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a cool concept, but it needs to do more damage if they're gonna do that. I don't know how to feel about that one. Maybe I'm wrong, but I legit think that's one of the more useless augments I've seen. As for my build, I run, you know, a little bit of duration. Don't want to have that negative at all. Other than that, I have mostly range and strength, because, you know, of course, you have her CC abilities. Aside from that, nothing out of the ordinary. Oh yeah, I'm running Stand United because I didn't, you know, Forma for Corrosive Projection. At some point I probably should, especially since I only have 1 Forma in her, but, you know. As far as Archon shards go, I'd probably throw a couple into Armor just because that's the one, you know, tank stat that's pretty low. Aside from that, I'd probably throw the rest of it into Duration. So how does Zephyr do in Deviri? Well, as always, regular Deviri, she does pretty good. As far as Steel Path goes, I actually quite enjoy getting her, especially for the excavation parts of it. Comes in handy when you're kind of making all the enemies float around. The only thing that kind of sucks about that is, you know, picking out the ones with the fuel cells. But even then, that's not all that hard. But her surprisingly high tankiness comes in handy when it comes to, you know, that's, or just in general Steel Path. But like I said, I'm gonna throw a couple armor shards in her because she only has 156 armor with my current build anyway. Zephyr is a frame I feel hits the flavor of, you know, itself pretty well. I know some people would disagree with me on that, but I personally think they did pretty good with that. It also is a frame that decided to be a bit different by being able to fly. And I honestly think that is a cool idea, and I think it's kind of what set the precedent for frames like Titania and Hildren later on, as far as, you know, having the flying mechanics. She's one of the frames I don't get to use very often. However, I always have an absolute blast whenever I do. More often than not, the reason why I don't end up using her all that often is because I tend to forget she exists when staring at the barrel of, you know, all the ones I have up top. Because I always have my list sorted by, you know, form account, so she's always at the very bottom because she only has 1. But, yeah. That's it, and that's all. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.